Welcome to Beyond the Flight Deck podcast with United Airlines pilot and investment advisor, Alan Bewley, who will take you behind the scenes with airline pilot entrepreneurs, academics, and other professionals. And now, your host, Alan Bewley.
If I had one word to describe Zachary Shapiro, it would be energy, enthusiasm, passion. Okay, that's three. But if you're a pilot for United Airlines, this is a good thing because Zach is the current managing director, Flight Crew Resources. Zach grew up in Westchester County, New York. His father in the financial services industry and his mother a teacher. Now, like many of us, he had a passion for aviation at a young age. While taking flying lessons in his teens, he realized he was more suited to solve industry problems from an office than in the cockpit. Zach's journey started with a hospitality administration major from Cornell, during which time he was fortunate to land two key internships. Since 2005, he's worked for 3 airlines, an airline financial consulting firm, and Airbus Industries. Welcome Beyond the Flight Deck, Zach Shapiro. Zach, welcome Beyond the Flight Deck.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for spending time with us today. As you told me a minute ago, you're out at our flight training center, which is near and dear to every United pilot's heart, I think. Anyway, we all know it well. So let's dive in and get to know who Zach is and what led you to the position you're in right now at United. So let's start out going all the way back to the beginning. Where'd you grow up? Quick insight, what your parents did for a living, siblings in the household, just a quick refresh on that.
Yeah, no, you got it. Thanks. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City in Westchester County, about 35 minutes New York City. And I was the product of very supportive parents. You know, I don't think you realize it at the time growing up, but my dad was in financial services. My mom taught nursery school, then went into fundraising, but was always there when my sister and I got home from school. That just, look, every family makes their own decisions as it relates to priorities and sacrifices they're willing to make to achieve those priorities. And my parents wanted to be very present. My dad was at all my high school baseball games every day, at my sister's events. I have a younger sister, three years younger than me. She's in the fashion industry in New York. And so, I had a great upbringing, don't realize how great it was in terms of the values that were instilled in me and the sacrifices my parents made to support my interests, until you start doing it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So,
no, I don't think I realized how great my parents were till I think I figured it out young. I was about 18. And it was mainly young for me because my dad taught me how to fly when I was 16. And that kind of melded our relationship. So that's cool. Yeah.
So in that vein, I started taking flying lessons. They saw I had a passion for airplanes at a very early age. And I instead of taking me to the park every weekend, we only went to the park every other weekend. We went to LaGuardia Airport, and the weekends in between. These were the days you could pass through security without having a ticket. And they spent hours just letting me gaze and watch airplanes out the window. And ultimately supported me taking flying lessons at the age of 12 at a Westchester County airport. Again, not realizing that the financial commitment they had to support, but it was obviously I'm not a pilot. We can get into that in a little bit if you want, but no, that all ties together in terms of what sort of leading me down the path where I was today. Supportive upbringing.
Interview over. We know how you got here. Where in financial services was your father? Institutional, retail? I'm a retail advisor with United Pilot.
Yeah. So he was a retail stockbroker when, before sort of technology became ubiquitous and a lot of it became self-service and you had the online heyday of us being able to do it ourselves with low commission trades. And so, he pivoted as the industry pivoted and went into sort of the compliance side of things, just knowing the business, the day to day, and leverage that to be able to, continue thriving in the industry he knows.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you mentioned baseball in high school. Sports growing up, that was big for you?
Yeah, not really. I'm like I'm 5'9", 150 pounds. It was a little bit of a late bloomer, so football was out of the question. Certainly not wrestling, but as a baseball guy, I played center field all throughout high school, and it's my favorite sport today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big New York Mets fan.
A Mets fan, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hardcore baseball people stay that way for life. So I get that. All right. So
Takes a special mind to appreciate the sport. I don't say that in like a way that it takes strategic thinking or above it. I just know that there are a lot of people who don't have the patience to watch 9 innings.
Yeah. No, it can be a long game. That's for sure. So all right. So whether they label this you or not, when Zach is about to graduate high school, the senior class could have voted you were most likely to X coming out of high school. What would that have been?
Yeah, I think that it was going to be sort of work in the airline industry. I think it was most likely to probably hear a welcome aboard announcement. This is your captain, Zachary Shapiro. And most likely that's people would get on an airplane and hear that one day.
Okay.
It was just well known that was my passion. The industry was my passion growing up.
Okay. And did you keep flying through high school? Keep working on your ratings?
Yeah, so I started flying at a Westchester County airport. I had to sit on a phone book to see out the front windshield of the Cicada Tampico, as I joked self-deprecatingly, a little bit of a late bloomer, and got up there. One of the things I learned, Westchester County Airport is not a good, efficient airport to take flying lessons.
Right.
The Hobbs is running, you're waiting, ATC's trying to fit you in between, the US Airways Express -8 and the G5, and so. And the Lear, and they're trying to get you out. And so, it was efficient, coupled with instructors coming and going, them moving on to corporate jet jobs and whatnot. And also I found, Alan, I would take off and my mind was running wild. We're doing S-turns above the Hudson River, over the Tappan Zee, touch and goes at Stewart. And I'm thinking about things, and it's just, I found my mind sort of running wild in a strategic sense. And I said to myself that this is awesome. This is a cool job. I think it's the coolest job in the world. But through that growth throughout high school, I think I found myself wanting to channel the passion towards the business side of the industry, rather than, having flying as a vocation, albeit I still think it's the coolest job in the world from just, a technical sense, as well as what the pilots do to be the literal connectors and enablers of what aviation is as a conduit of global commerce, allowing kids to see Disney World for the first time, connecting grandparents with their grandkids. So at risk of getting too profound too early on, I just think what we all do collectively, how we support each other in our collective mission of, in United's case, connecting people and united the world is really special.
Yeah. And I still amazes me that this company makes money from time to time. Just any company, any airline.
Yeah.
All right. So you went to my father's alma mater. He's a 1960 Cornell graduate, and you studied hospitality administration. How did that play into what's turned out for your career? Was that a good choice?
Yeah, it was, because listen, at the end of the day, airlines are service industries, right? And back when I went to school, it may have not felt the time. It may have been in the heyday of airlines feeling like a commodity. But the concepts of the services industry, whether it's hotels, restaurant, cruise ships, it's high fixed cost, low variable cost, right? Capital intensive assets. A cruise ship, building a hotel, buying a wide body airplane. Yeah. But serving one incremental customer really doesn't cost a whole lot much more. Mm-hmm. So the concepts, the fundamentals were very applicable. It's called the School of Hotel Administration. I had an amazing 4 years there. But I had the latitude to apply my projects to aviation. It called hotel administration, but it was really a school geared towards the services industry. And they're broad, from, retirement, home management, to sports management, to, hotels, restaurants, cruise ships, airlines. And so I was allowed to chart this course there and orient it towards doing a lot of work on airlines because of the fundamentals on the cost side as well as the commercial side being very in line with the principles, revenue management, financial accounting, and so on and so forth.
Sure. So while you were there, you had what looked like two pretty cool internships, one at Seabury Capital, one at JetBlue. JetBlue, you did some route planning work. I think we might all understand that a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about Seabury Capital, because you kind of revisited this later in your career, the financial.
So I broke into the industry in as you mentioned, the advisory capacity, and I had some great mentors there that taught me everything about the business. I mean, I went into Seabury just knowing how to make a chart in Excel, bar graph, and had an interest in the industry, a passion for the industry, and the folks there took to my passion and taught me the business of aviation, and so I will always owe them that debt of gratitude. And it was great. It did work around just advisory services for airlines that were trying to raise capital to buy airplanes, or just for general corporate purposes, financing for their airplanes, business plan evaluation, investors that were looking into invest into the space and looking for our assessment. And so I was like a kid in the candy store, and great people, great exposure. But then to point out, Alan, I saw the industry from this macro or sort of third-party advisor perspective, and I really wanted to understand it from one of the players' perspectives. And JetBlue at that time, very different airline than it is today, didn't fly to Boston yet, didn't have the E190 yet, was still more in its relative infancy in terms of its life cycle. And it was an airline that was out there to really live this concept of service, right? Its adage was bringing humanity back to air travel. And it really jibed with everything I was going to school for around this service education and viewing air travel as a service, and not a commodity. And so through some will, through some connections, I just was able to do, as you pointed out, my second couple of internships while at school with JetBlue in route planning.
Okay, and so I assume the connections you made there parlayed into your first job out of Cornell. JetBlue. Talk a little bit about the work you did, not so much your intern year, but when you worked there your first year.
So I worked I started my full-time career there in operational planning. And it was sort of like an internal consulting group that went into various facets of the operation and just sort of brought some consultant-like approach to things like the turn process of what happens between when an airplane blocks in and blocks out, and how are you doing it, efficiently, dependably, consistently, obviously safely. The safety is obviously always number one value. And so what was really neat about that is before we started doing projects like that is I took the class that our customer service crew members took, the airport above wing agents, because it was neat that if we were going to go into the operation and do projects like that, how do we do so with credibility and not be like the headquarters type that are coming in to tell us what to do, but be able to say, hey, I was trained like you were trained. I had experience working in the airport, and now I'm here as a partner with complementary perspectives, and I want your perspective. And it really made it very successful. But it was great. JetBlue also has or had back then a holiday helper program where folks from the airports or folks from headquarters would go down and help out at the airports during the peak holiday travel periods. And having had a full-time role in operational planning where you were immersed in the operation as your day-to-day job, made it very seamless then during these holiday peak periods to go and be checking customers in, helping board flights. And so was a really fun way to start my full-time career in my early 20s.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of interesting. A couple of things you said there, giving you the credibility by taking that customer service course, giving you the credibility when you showed up at the holiday season. What's always been interesting to me is I live right next to the University of Virginia, and people come through here and then they graduate and go to the Darden School of Business, as you went to Wharton. They come out of there and get a job with a consulting firm, and now they're consulting big companies. I'm like, how does 2 years at a business school really, how does a 30-year veteran in an industry look at a 22-year-old, 24-year-old with an MBA trying to tell them how to change their business. I have a hard time. I've never been on either side of that table, but I mean, yeah, I'm curious about that. You know, I don't know how much experience you have with it, but it sounds like you at least took the initiative, or they put you through that initiative. So when you showed up, you knew something about it.
Yep. Yep. And you show up and people sort of start like this with their arms crossed, and then slowly the arms come down, and you develop that partnership to work through the issues together. Because the reality is those people who do that day in and day out, boarding the flights day in and day out, loading the bags, it's them who knows the issues, right? We need to show up and listen. And you know, it's a classic, you know, approach to leadership about listening to those who do it day in, day out, and understanding the pain points. They tell you where the problems are.
Right. Yeah. Well, at the same time, though, you can still come with a different perspective, right?
Exactly.
I think that's probably what it is. All right. You did not spend that long at JetBlue, and you went back into the aviation finance side of the house with Skyworks Holdings. What sucked you back out? And then you spent a couple of years there. Tell us about why that transition happened and what you did there.
Yeah. So the partners I had worked for at Seabury had split off and started their own advisory shop called Skyworks. And originally when they started, they had more focused on the financial advisory type work, around the traditional, more investment banking, capital raising type work. And they knew my passion was around the strategic advisory stuff, helping airlines decide which airplanes to buy, business plan analysis, you know, helping investors analyze a business and the prospects of the business. And so after Skyworks got started and they were really looking to diversify out of the focus area of the investment banking work that they had focused on spooling up, and really now trying to balance it with some of the strategic advisory work where they knew my head was, right? When we talked about my head running wild at altitude. And so, you know, one thing led to another. I go sit on the porch of one of the partners' houses one night. We catch up, and sort of one thing led to another. And I found myself at Skyworks, and that was the first, I think, lesson to me of that. You don't want to be running away from something. You want to be running towards something else as it relates to the next step in your career. And so I wasn't running away from JetBlue. I could have, there was a lot I wanted to see and do and more at JetBlue. JetBlue is a great company. I can still recite the 5 values: safety, caring, fun, passion, and integrity that JetBlue lives by today. I joke that there will always be part of me that bleeds blue. But I wasn't running away from JetBlue. I was running towards this new opportunity at Skyworks to go help build stuff out. And that has been sort of the catalyst of one thing leading to the other of where I am today. But I wound up working on a lot of projects around aircraft analysis and helping airlines understand, you know, the A320 family versus the 737 family, and then within a fleet family, the gauge analysis, right? So can I fill the A321 often enough at a profit maximizing yield and load factor to offset the incremental operating cost of the heavier airplane?
Right.
And analysis like that, and especially for airlines who don't necessarily aren't in the business of buying airplanes on the regular, right? They're operators, they're commercial organizations of marketing and selling the product, but buying these big expensive assets that they may only do once every decade, if that.
Right.
They brought in specialists, and I wound up working on a lot of projects like that, and that's ultimately what wound up leading me to Airbus one day. So let me pause there in the event you want to talk anything more about Skyworks.
Yeah. So when you are helping airlines make these decisions, say these aircraft order decisions, do you guys also follow on to the actual negotiation process with Airbus, with Boeing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's not just which is the ideal fleet mix for us for this next order. It's now let's move on to negotiating with the manufacturers. I want to actually, there was a question I had about your stint there at JetBlue, and you were talking about things with turn times. Did you guys at JetBlue study the industry leader in turn time, Southwest, at the time, and look at, how they did their 36-minute turn times or whatever they were or still are?
Oh yeah, no, you look at a lot of best practices and sort of the Gantt chart of the bottlenecks and which airlines do what but there are different business models, right? And so obviously Southwest's boarding is very different than what JetBlue was as it relates to no assigned seats on Southwest. And so JetBlue piloted a handful of different things as one of the projects we did that was sort of different facets of the or each of the elements that compose the turn process. What are the best practices out there? What makes sense for our business model? And in line with a lot of other airlines have done that as well. There are boarding practices out there that on the internet that you've seen some other airlines pursue as well. There's something called like Wilma. Window, middle aisle, trying to board that way, boarding no seat assignments, whatnot. So I think, it's you look out there and you look at best practices, you try different things. Sometimes you double down on what you're doing, and sometimes you find a new way of doing stuff.
Yeah, or you fail. Yeah. If it's funny, my interview with Scott was great because he went to work for America West early on. It was a small company, and the CEO said, "Look, if you do well, we're going to promote you. We're going to let you do what you want. If you do well, you're promoted. If you screw it up, you're gone." And the man put his money where his mouth is. It was
No, I watched that interview last night in preparation for today.
Oh, good. All right. So you had a great experience. It sounds like at Skyworks. You obviously made a lot of connections. You worked with airlines. You worked with obviously aircraft manufacturers, because from there you went to Airbus and you stayed there for quite a while. What was your primary role there, and what kind of work did you do?
Yeah, so let me start by answering a question you didn't ask. How I landed at Airbus. The phone rang somewhere. Well, if you had asked me 20 years ago if I could see myself working at an OEM, I would have laughed and said, "I'm not an engineer. What would I do at a manufacturing company?" Right? How naive a response that was, naive if not ignorant. But it just goes to show you don't know what you don't know is out there and the opportunities. So phone rang one day, someone who I worked with on a deal on the other side of the table had found himself at Airbus. And he said, "Hey, I think you'd be great here." And again, I had what I'll call ignorant response of, what am I going to do at an engineering company and a manufacturing company? I'm a business guy. And not appreciating that these manufacturers, these OEMs, have these big marketing and sales organizations who would like to have people who understand how airlines evaluate the product, how the end users of the product schedule them, how they flow through networks, how they analyze maintenance costs and whatnot. And so I went into Airbus in an airline marketing role that does a lot of fleet planning work from the Airbus perspective. So partnering with airlines, obviously under the guise of promoting the Airbus product, but around fleet planning, financial analysis, revenue analysis, right? So how often you're going to fill the incremental seats, at what price, the cost of the airplanes in the case of Airbus versus its competing airplanes, aircraft performance analysis, right? So hot and high conditions, contaminated runway. I mean, I learned so much about operations, engineering, performance analysis, second segment Klein, VMO, and single engine out, right? What drives performance limitations, LOPAs, layout of passenger accommodations, and efficiencies of where you place the lavs, stuff like that. And then I moved into a sales role, which is really, it's not like peddling product per se. It's leading the team responsible for the business partnership with airlines, and the cross-functional team comprises the airline marketing role I just described, contracts negotiation, the customization efforts, the financing of the airplanes, and the sales director brings that together to partner with the airlines. And so I did that with a variety of airlines. You got to know a lot of people at the airlines. Sometimes I'd be coming home from business trips and have to pinch myself that this was real. Like, my job was to sit around and discuss fleet planning with airline executives. And one of the airlines I worked with was U.S. Airways before the U.S. Airways American merger. And then when the U.S. Airways American merger happened, I assumed responsibility of the combined airline. They were actually, U.S. Airways was, before the merger, the operator of the world's largest Airbus fleet. Not a very widely known fact. So it was a great privilege to get to lead that relationship on behalf of Airbus.
That's cool. So talking about Airbus and Boeing as well, you were there 09 to 16, quite a while.
Yep.
That would have been an amazing time for Boeing and or Airbus to create a replacement for the 767, yet nobody did. And you look at us, we're hanging on to our 67300s, 400s. American has parked theirs. As my interview with Ankit, talking to him, he's like, that's great for us because they've got the capital outlay of a 787. Again, high fixed cost, low variable. And they're going to try and fly European routes with an airplane that needs to be flown 12, 14 hours. But so it's a good thing for us. Yeah, we may have to have a spare airplane or two around to keep the fleet going. But why? Why, the 67s came out in the 80s. There's just not been a replacement. Is this something that the airlines and you discussed when you were at Airbus? And, I can't really speculate as to what was going on at Boeing at the time, but why are we here with this huge hole unfilled?
Yeah, no, yes, the short answer is yes. We are always, we're always discussing that type stuff. And it was our job to, understand the market. So knowing what our customers, what our market needs are. And so do a lot of work around sort of 757 replacement, 767 replacement. I think you look at sort of some of the approaches around re-engining, right? And when you think about developing a whole new aircraft platform versus the economics of taking what's a very reliable product today that's proven, known, mature, and I mean mature in a good way from an ops reliability standpoint, and leverage sort of re-engined economics. And we've seen that play out on the single aisle side with the Neo for Airbus or the Max for Boeing, as well as on the wide body side for Airbus's strategy around re-engineering the 330 to have the 800 and 900, parlaying off the 200 and 300 respectively. You get sort of, I don't want to go into sales pitch mode, but you get the benefits of a proven, mature platform with re-engined benefits, as opposed to, everything that comes with developing a new airplane, both the lead time, airplane development costs that are supposed to be passed along to the customer, and then invariably, the entry into service period on the path to that maturity.
So during the time you were there, were airlines not asking for, 190 to 220 seat wide body airplane, i.e. 767-300 replacement at the time? Airbus didn't build it. Everything they built was a little bigger or a little smaller. Boeing, the 787-8 is still a good bit bigger than the 767-300. So I guess what you're telling me is if the airlines at the time weren't asking for it, you guys weren't building it. But, the re-engineering, I understand, but they don't have new engines on the 767-300s or 400s. It doesn't even sound like it's being talked about. So, yeah,
I think, again, to your point, not knowing the strategy up in Seattle, nor to give out, I think the strategic thinking of the time, I think when you look at what wound up playing out, the 321 Neo and the variants that have built, they're being built off of that, meaning, what is going to be the XLR, right? Airplanes that we at United are going to take and very excited about, served one end of the 767s market, right?
Okay.
So there's sort of the lower end of the 767 market, whether you want to call them long and thin routes or whatnot,
Right.
Especially with starting to put lie flat business class seats on that airplane, that there was a portion of the 767's market that was taken by 321 Neo. And then the upper end of the market, I mean, you look at an airplane like a 330 gauged airplane or a 787 gauged airplane. I think what was also going on in that time, when you look at the evolution of the product and business class seats, right? You needed a bigger gauge to sometimes offer the same number of business class seats because everything went to lie flat, right? Remember when sort of the days when sort of like Club World on BA was pioneering and Virgin Atlantic pioneered some of these, a bed on an airplane, like lie flat, right? And EOS Airlines to London. And now look, like lie flat became the standard and whatnot. So there was also the migration of gauge because to serve the same business number of business class customers with the evolution of the business class product, you also need a bigger gauge. And so look, to your point, is there always some element of the market that may not be covered with the optimized airplane? Yeah, and that's what it's on the OEMs to go figure out the business case. How much of that exists?
And what will it cost the OEMs to come up with it? And then what will the airlines willing to pay for it? So if you can cover 65%,
you have a career as an airplane sales person if you want one.
Yeah. So you can cover 65% of the market by covering the 321 Neo Max 10 and then the 330 787-8. You just miss a third of it, possibly.
And I would actually argue that that percentage that you quoted is much, much higher. But
Okay, fair enough. All right. So someone or something then convinces you that you're done with being a sales and marketing guy and it's time to go back into airline operations. And like you said, post-merger, you go to American. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I got to know a lot of folks at American, as I said, through the Airbus business partnership, and they were. I think they saw that I was an airline guy at heart. It wasn't just about the metal to me. I like talking about flows and lines of flying and how an airplane flows through a network. How do you crew it? Where does it go into maintenance, right? How do you provide fleet concentration to have swappability when an airplane goes out of service? And I'm having these discussions and relishing it with the airlines. And I think they say, well, you're an airline guy, Zach. So, and so, and so they made me an ops guy. I had a first job at American in system operations, what American calls their integrated operations center. It's this big flagship building down south of DFW where the entire airline is dispatched from, do maintenance planning, crew scheduling, emergency planning and response. I mean, there are pictures of it on the internet. It's like this big NASA-like operation when you think about like a mission control. And it's the equivalent to our at United NOC. And in my first role at American was to go develop feedback loops between system operations and the planning groups of the airline. Because the planning groups of the airline, the network plannings of the world, the operations plannings of the world would develop these great plans. But if system operations was struggling to deliver the plan every day and something was off, and there was opportunity to go develop these feedback loops around, hey, look at these wide body lines of flying. Great aircraft utilization, looks great on paper, but tough to actually execute across the operation. And really, with a couple colleagues, spearheaded that effort to bring system operations perspective into the schedule development process.
Okay. These are things you were at Airbus talking to people at American, them complaining about, or United complaining about, right? Things that they're struggling with, and now you get to jump into it. while you were back at Airbus for a second, you did get your MBA at Wharton. What kind of value do you see in that? There are a lot of people watching who have kids that are going to college, who are their kids are considering an MBA. I talked about Darden School of Business here at Virginia. How much value did that bring to you from a perspective of doing your job, credentialing, networking?
Yeah, so it's fascinating. Everyone's business case around the MBA is different.
Right.
And I had written off getting an MBA, not because I don't see the value in it, but my business case was challenged. And so I thought about it a long time. Would I want it, all else being equal? Yes, but all else wasn't equal to me. And here's why. I would have financed it 100% through debt. I wasn't looking to use it to catalyze a career step or an industry change. Mm-hmm. And related there too, because of that, like I wasn't looking to go into consulting or, investment banking where the compensation structure is very bonus based, where there'd be a windfall to help repay that debt. And then lastly, and you sort of alluded to this in some of the comments earlier on about, advisory versus being in the industry. 2 years in the industry to leave the industry for 2 years to go back to the classroom. What was the value of the classroom experience versus the two, what I could keep learning in the industry for 2 years? And so the business case wasn't clear to me. Would I love to have it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I had ruled it out. And then Airbus came to me and said, what about if we partner on this?
Okay.
And Airbus helped sponsor my MBA in an unprecedented way, in what I thought was a win-win fashion. And so I went and got it while I was still working, doing what I described of the role.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the biggest things I learned from that wasn't about in the classroom. It was about time management and making every minute of the day count. So look, would I recommend it, all else equal? Yeah. The learning back in the classroom, years removed from undergrad, and having work experience that there's a maturity that you're back in the classroom. But there's also the symbiosis of the leveraging all your classmates, having that as well. So I was in class with, investment bankers. I was in classes with doctors. I was in class with people who are in the Navy.
Yeah.
And honestly, not take anything away from the faculty, but the real secret sauce was that interaction with your classmates, the diversity of perspectives, and the maturity they're all bringing at the time they're doing their MBAs.
Sure. And it's questionable how much that would benefit a 22-year-old versus a 30-year-old.
Right.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. What was interesting to me, both Paul Carlson and Ankit Gupta got their first jobs with airlines through contacts they made in their MBA programs. So yours was a little bit different, but interesting. Okay. All right. So you step into American in that ops reliability role, it's really interesting to me though, because the people behind the curtains generating all these great plans, then you got to bring them out into reality and see how they work. How long did you end up doing that versus, and then you went into flight training, planning, and scheduling. Then you went back and then you kind of went down the scheduling planning path.
Yeah, so I'll just give you the sort of the rest of the career at American. I'm happy to dive into anything more specific. Yeah, so I went over to the flight training, planning, and scheduling team, responsible for planning everything from the simulators through OE. So in-doc through OE, everything in the schoolhouse, the simulators, everything with the LCAs. And I went over there not knowing a thing about their world. I didn't know how often we brought pilots in for training when we went over there. And I was thrown into this, and I think it was a little bit of a test on both sides. So I'm obviously not a pilot by trade. So bringing someone with my perspective over there, seeing how that would work out, and also throwing me into the deep end of a world I don't know. And was the longest year of my life, but I grew the most. Went over there, had to work through things around team issues with HR. We had to work through things with just any of the agencies we partner with that's involved in flight training, from regulatory standpoint, the FAA and whatnot, and just all the Allied Pilots Association, right, was my first foray, really engaging with unions. And so again, and honestly, also one of the biggest learning was, it was for the first time in my career where I had to learn to delegate because I didn't know everything. You had to rely on the team. And for anyone who struggles with that, you need to be thrown into an opportunity where you're forced to do that.
Yeah.
So I did that. An opportunity came along, a promotion to go lead line maintenance planning. That is everything from, the maintenance network, where we do maintenance, the footprint, how much work do we do in the hubs versus the spokes, and aircraft routing, the team responsible for putting the right tail on the line of flying to get it routed into maintenance, the bill of work planners, the AMT, headcount, staffing, and budget. So went over there. Was there during COVID and the pandemic. I had a peers job who was eliminated during the restructuring of the airline. So I also took over base maintenance planning, the heavy maintenance planning, the hangar work, our relationships with the business partnerships that do some of the aircraft conversion work, and then moved into a newly created role called Integrated Operations Strategic Planning that had responsibility for what's called the operational fabric functions of the airline. So crew planning, pilot planning, flight attendant planning, the block time planning, and then also coordinating across all of the operating functions, airports, tech ops, regional, cargo, to ensure that we were building schedules that balanced profitability with operability. Right. So had sort of functional responsibility for a few functions that were sort of operational fabric, and then the liaise, the ambassador, the coordinator across the operational functions with network planning. And actually, my team sat with network planning to ensure that the operational perspective was there, conjoined, and really immersed during the incubation of network development plans, as opposed to sort of having to catch up to them.
Yeah. How different are those roles? And just kind of go back and look. You dealt with overall operations reliability, but then you went back into planning, flight training planning, maintenance planning, big pick, all maintenance planning. Is it just a different deck of chairs that you're pushing around? Are they wholly different you're trying to accomplish the same thing, but just with very different moving parts?
Yeah, no, I think that it takes so much of us all to come together every day to get, seats sold at a profit maximizing load factor and yield, an airplane on the gate ready to fly, MEL free, giving our airports ops colleagues the chance to turn the airplane in the time that they're allotted, get an airplane dispatched off the ground, land on time, reliably, and obviously foremost safely. Once per day, right? Yeah. Think about the airlines that we do that on the main line between 2,000 and 3,000 times a day. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And you think about no one function can do that alone. So I think what these roles do, Alan, is they teach you to think like a general manager. You're not a subject matter expert in any one of them, but I think that you go from role to role, you develop a mosaic of perspectives that helps hone your way of just acting like a general manager and leading. And I think American does a really good job of developing leaders. And they've moved people around. My stint at American isn't unlike others. and to develop that mosaic of perspectives. But you go into these roles and you shouldn't be the subject matter expert,
Right.
but it's how you go in, bring that GM perspective, see how we do things, see how we, where there's opportunity, develop a vision, affect change, and bring people along with you to buy into that change for the betterment of everyone. At the end of the day, that's the playbook, I think. It's leadership. And, not to take anything away from the technical aspects of one role versus another, but I think the fundamentals are very transferable of how to succeed in the role.
Sure. So there's a gigantic sucking sound from American to United when it comes to leadership, right? Everyone I've interviewed and beyond, Andrew Nacella and Patrick Quayle, who I haven't talked to, all you guys are coming from American. So you are recruited last year to come over here, and like you said before our call, fill a role of a guy that's been doing it for quite a long time, on and off. What brought you? What was the determining factor to get you over to United?
So I think it probably started when I was sitting at my desk one day and I saw the announcement of United Next. And I said, that's interesting. And look, the pandemic was an opportunity. I think it was a soul illuminating event where a lot of corporations were faced with this unprecedented 99.9th percentile event that no one plans for.
Right.
And the real company's soul was illuminated in how it reacted to that event. And American did some great things that would have never been done. I mean, look at the fleet simplification that American did, and I can rave on and on about how American handled it. But I started seeing what United was doing. And I started seeing what was just this rallying team around this strategy, this vision, this North Star of United Next, leveraging Core 4, leveraging connecting people, uniting the world. They said, we're going to go challenge other airlines out there to take the top spot as North America's premium airline of choice.
Yeah.
And so for that, for a lot of other reasons, someone says to me, well, you answered the phone when United called. Why did you even answer the phone? I think it was because I was intrigued by that. And so I got to know the people of United during the interview process, who I find to be awesome. But simply, Alan, I'm buying into United Next. I'm buying into how United is an industry innovator and disruptor and trailblazer, right? Whether it's the boom supersonic order, whether it's being a pioneer in vertical takeoff and landing space, whether it's the electric aircraft, whether it's the high J 767 that Patrick's team pioneered, the CRJ 550, connection saver, right? Putting the customer first, saying, hey, maybe there are times when the traditional metrics aren't what's good for those who we serve, and really was showing this proclivity to challenge legacy assumptions for the new world we were entering.
Yeah.
And I was jazzed by the opportunity to be a part of that. And so much so that I was willing to reset my career, take a step back from the momentum, the trajectory. Look, if I wanted to, if my reason for getting up every morning was to be promoted, the thing to do would have been to stay at American,
sure.
riding the momentum and the trajectory. But I got a lot of career left ahead of me. And to me, the bigger picture of being part of something bigger than myself and helping to energize my team towards that was just tantalizing.
Yeah. So it's a gamble. I mean, you read a lot of trade publications and financials documents. It's a gamble. We're making, huge airplane order, announcements, things like that. But I mean, I'm Legacy United, but one of the best articles I ever read was written by Greg Brenneman, published in the Harvard Business Journal, about the go forward plan that Gordon Bethune and he inked together in Gordon's, dining room one night. It was fascinating, and it worked. I mean, Continental became a great airline again. So it's a gamble here. So that's interesting. All right. So I did something before this podcast I haven't done with the other ones, which is I polled the pilot group a little bit and said, hey, what questions do you guys want to ask Zach? And I'm not gonna repeat some of them, but because they weren't towards you, it's just in general. But I think the one that the most resounding question is, when are we going back to something that looks normal? And let me give you a big example, and this because you actually did a little digging for me. Today is April 27th. On March 4th, I finished 67 captain transition. I still have yet to do IOE, right? As you told me a few weeks ago, I'm lapsed. I've got to go back to TK, but no sims are available till May, right? So, we've got a host of issues. When do you think that, we know what your job is, we know what you do, bid just closed. When do you see things trying to get back to more of normalcy?
Yeah. So, and obviously, knowing this will be up on YouTube, and I have to,
again, crystal ball. I don't want a crystal ball, really. I just, what's driving the problems, I guess. And
so here's what I think I'll say is, at risk of getting cutesy or too profound.
Right.
What is normal? What is the new normal? And so I've said to the team, look, we have to think of ourselves as two different airlines. I've talked about being United prior and United next. I mean, you talked about it, Alan, with the aircraft order, the aircraft coming once every X days. The traditional airline planning cycle, the cyclicality of seasonal shoulders and peaks and troughs is out the window, right? That change how we plan pilots, that's going to change how we plan for training and who go, right? Because in the old world, right, your seasonal troughs, you may leverage to do more training during that if you don't need as many of the pilots. But in the new world, in the new United Next world, what is normal? And I try and get my team's head wrapped around the airline we know doesn't exist anymore. And that shouldn't scare us. We should be so excited about the airline we're poised to be. But it's an airline that there's a lot of work and a lot of planning going in to be that airline and be successful. And I know we're going to be successful. But it's a world that's just different. And so I think it's first getting folks to be wrapped around their heads that normal is changing. And so, and look, and I think I wrote about this in a crew resource update. May have been my March one. Look, they're going to be being the trailblazer of is not sort of a straight path through sunshine and rainbows, and there are going to be ebbs and flows, windiness in the road, time where it was the road's a little muddier than we would have liked it to be, and that comes with being the trailblazer, being with leadership, being the leader, being the pioneer. And so I think what you described is probably the transition to growing out of the backside of the pandemic, bouncing back and charting this course towards what our new normal is going to be. And you may have heard me talk about it in other different contexts, but one of the things I really try and work with the team on is revisiting our assumptions. So taking the mindset shift that we need to have to be successful and say, hey, let's revisit our assumptions, okay? Does what got us here may not make us successful in the new normal we're going to be. And we can't just take for granted that that's going to be the case. And if we don't change a thing, okay, we're moving forward with double down conviction that how we did things is the right way to do things for the new normal. But I think it starts with this mindset. And I love seeing it throughout the company, just the energizing way people are rallied around this common cause, this future strategy, this North Star, whatever you want to call it. And it's unifying us, and the poise to be successful, and the resources we're putting into plan to be successful. And I think some of what you described is just, as we put the car on the road to chart down that course, it comes with being that trailblazer and innovator. You trailblaze, you chart the course, and you find ways through sometimes the mud at times. So,
yeah.
and better for it.
There are numerous of us in the same position I'm in. And don't get me wrong, yeah. I'm sitting at home getting 67 captain pay, doing nothing for the airline. It's disconcerting from a employee perspective, wanting the company to do well. But at the same time, me personally, I run a business from my house. So, it's great for me, but how long can we sustain it? And I'm far from the only one. I've talked to dozens of people that are in the same boat. Now I know things are sounding good domestically, like we're ramping up big time. I know American announced, we've announced forward bookings are looking great. But we've still got 777s we're trying to get flying. I assume that's playing a role. We're still waiting on Asia and the Pacific Rim to open up more. So should I assume then, like you said, these are the bumps in the road of transitioning out of COVID and into, hey, look, we've got all this ready to go. We've prepared everything for it. It's kind of a wait and see game. I guess one of the questions is, how long do we wait and see? If a year from now, for some reason, there's a hiccup and the triples aren't back. If a year from now, Asia, your Pacific Rim still hasn't opened up. I mean, I guess that's a bigger conversation than just your department. That's a huge, does that concern you?
So look, it's, there's a lot going on right now, right? The height of the pandemic may be behind us, but there's still a long tail in some commercial respects as it relates to the point you pointed out, not flying necessarily everywhere we would beforehand, the not flying all of our 777s, not having all the airplanes we thought we would. And so the challenge is building our training plans takes a long lead time. Right, we're making training decisions months and months from now based on an assumed block hour supportability that we have to go support. And when the changes happen inside that window where we've trained pilots for fleets that now we don't need to fly, now we're in balance somewhere, and we're straining another fleet and so I think, but that's our job, to be able to, be agile like that, react to that. And, I think part of the new normal is that never going away, because it's also not always adverse situations. It's opportunistic, right? If Patrick and Ankit's team say, hey, we see an opportunity there, how can you all in crew planning help us go? And what we want to do is do everything we can to figure out a way to support where network sees opportunity, because it's good for us all, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. But the reality is, at risk of oversimplifying our world, we make plans around block hour targets that we're given out for the next 12 to 18 months. And that's what we build training plans and do vacancy bids to support. And so I think it's ultimately what you described. I mean, those issues you bring up are bigger than crew planning. They're going to affect the block hour plan inside potentially the training window for which we've already started to train towards plans. And so how do we go re-rally? And that's what, that's what we've been doing sort of with the triples right now.
Two more quick questions. So you're in Denver right now at the training center. I've never been to the American Training Center. Do we have the resources in Denver to execute this next plan, in your opinion? Do we have the facility? Do we have the resources, the manpower? Okay.
I do. I walk into this, and I walk into this with pride every morning. And that's not taking anything away from any other training centers, but from other airlines. But like, I love, I don't know if anyone's seen the ad, like when your kids ask where pilots come from, tell them the pilots are made in Denver. And so I walk through and I see the buzz in the halls. I speak to, captain upgrade classes, new LCA classes. There's a great buzz in here. And so I think the resources is here, the spirit's here, the leadership is here, the resolve is here, and the long-term lens, and the commitment, the dedication, and the clarity of purpose around what our mission is, Flight Ops' role in achieving United Next is unambiguous. Hopefully you hear the conviction in my voice. You don't take it as naive optimism, but rather confidence based on what I see and excitement for what will be.
Yeah. You mentioned LCAs. I mentioned me needing one. And this is a labor relations issue, honestly, but it doesn't seem like we have the incentives in place for people to go out and do the LCA work, especially when there are, premium pay trips flying out everywhere and these guys can't take advantage of it. I assume this is a bottleneck you're aware of in the pilot training perspective. I got early notice training, for example, but I got late notice, i.e. no IOE. So I assume this is a piece you're working on with the company to try and figure out how we can incentivize more people to get out there and do this LCA work.
I spend a portion of my day tending to the awareness of this matter. Yes.
Okay. All right. Enough said. All right. The last thing's more of a comment. And this was a comment that came out of the questions, but it's also one that I've known for a long time. And I know you're busy. Paul did a great job of answering emails, questions, and you answered me in a very timely manner. I've had other people actually say that, yeah, he actually responded. He was on vacation with his family, right? We don't expect you to do that, right? But that's the one feedback I would say is because your department is so important into our futures and our ability to earn. Anything you can do to keep the feedback coming to us is outstanding. Yep. And even if it means an additional crew resource update, as a financial advisor, I write things time appropriate. And, I put out something yesterday, the market was down another 2.5%. So the communication, I think, would be outstanding if you could keep that going.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not too proud to admit, it's something I've struggled with the most since I get here, because I'm all about communication, and especially to those we serve. My team serves the pilots, and you all are making life decisions based on information from us and what we can glean to allow you to make those educated decisions. It's interesting. Before I stepped into the role, I heard, that was one of many of the accolades of my predecessor's legacy. I read the crew resource updates, and I think I've responded to hundreds of pilots' emails since I've gotten here.
Yeah.
There are also hundreds I know that I haven't, right? So I responded to an email this morning before this call, and the response I got was, wow, I was never expecting a response so quick. I think it was within 2 minutes. Yeah. But I also know there are others from November 15th before I got my laptop that are just fell through the cracks. And I feel badly because it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's a great opportunity to just chat for a minute about something that's been on my mind. And I hear about the crew resource updates, and I hear from the pilots. I've gotten emails about saying how, well, you all are expected to make PAs when every X minutes when stuff's going on. To keep the customers informed, and that I need to be doing that to you all as well. And you know what? You all are right. But we also
understand that the lens you're looking through is a 12 to 18 month lens.
Yeah.
And things change after that. We understand that. We're sitting here during a maintenance delay just telling people we don't know what's happening, but it's still happening. Right.
Yeah. But there's value in that no update. And I want you all to know that I get that. It's about that dependable rhythm of, that every month doesn't have to be a 4-page CRU, but even just, first week of the month, hey, here's what's going on in 3 paragraphs. And some people may say, Zach, can we only write 3 paragraphs? It feels like you're just getting started at 3 paragraphs. But also, there have been times since I've gotten here where it's also like, you all probably have a mindset in the cockpit of when something's, when something's off, when you see a yellow, master caution. It's like aviate, navigate, communicate. And so like when we get a wrench thrown in the plan, like, 777 like returns, it's like sort of, okay, let's stabilize the situation and then communicate it. And so there have been opportunities like that during the first quarter. Could we have communicated sooner and earlier? Yeah. One of the things I want to do is I'm in the process of restructuring the team. We're going to go set up our team differently. Not take anything away from how the team was set up in the past, but this comes back to revisiting our assumptions to be successful for the airline we're going to be going forward. One of the things we're going to do is centralize the pilot support function to ensure help hub inquiries get tended to and routed correctly. Right now, we respond to pilot inquiries in a very dispersed fashion across folks who do it on top of their monthly pilot planning and production responsibilities. We're going to centralize that within pilot support, whose folks' job is going to be to ensure that we're responding to pilot inquiries timely and whatnot. I always recommend the Help Hub request because it gets routed to a SME. But I also encourage folks, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. But my response time is a bit polarized. Sometimes I'm responding to people before they think they've even hit send. Other times there are people that haven't gotten the response and it eats me up, but I'm not too shy to admit it. But regardless, I think what I'd like to do is twofold. Ensure that we are pushing out information on a monthly basis in some way, shape, or fashion, and you're just hearing from us. I'd like to go deeper than that by ensuring that we have a living document around matters that are we know to be topical. When's the next vacancy bid? Where do we think it'll be focused? And of the folks who have a vacancy award, when can they expect to be trained? And keep that as a living document. And the last thing I like to do as we do that, frankly, Alan, we didn't talk a lot about leadership necessarily, but really introduce you to the team. I'm a soundbar for some people's really great work. Really great people who know their craft well, who take a lot of pride in the responsibility of serving the pilots. And I want you all to get to know them. I'm a soundbar. I joke with the team. I'm the armor all on the tire. You can drive the car without the armor all, but the people who are the transmission, the engine, the air conditioning, like I want to start bringing those people out to the forefront. I'll tell you what, and I'll shut up after this, I promise. I got an email from a pilot 2 days ago talking about the service that my team provided that pilot, 2 members of my team. And it made my day because it's just those team members are unsung heroes who work tirelessly. And not that they do it for the thanks, but I want them to, and my leadership is developing them as leaders. And I look forward to letting the pilot group come to learn and know who the real all-stars are. It's not me.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I think that's a great leadership trait. The greatest thing for me with my one employee is when one of my clients says, "Oh man, she did a knockout job with me for this." I'm like, that's outstanding. So, all right. Well, Zach, with that, I will let you go. I really appreciate you spending the time with me. I know the pilot group will really enjoy getting to know this. As best we can, we're going to hold you to some of your strives to communication wise. We'd like to hear from you more. That'd be great. And yeah, congratulations on the new role here at United, and we look forward to seeing you work your way through the ranks here. Awesome. And I'm poised for what we're all going to go do together, but I'd be remiss if I didn't end by how I should have started, which is for any pilot that's listening, thank you. Thank you for your leadership out there. You're flying us forward to United Next. You're delivering on our quest to deliver a world-class customer experience, continue to better it. And you all are leaders in the operation. You're delivering the brand, and simply we couldn't do it without that leadership. It makes a difference on the customer experience. There's an inextricable link between the customer experience and the pilot's engagement, whether it's a PA announcement or some other way of engaging. And you all are working hard to do that. And simply, thank you. We appreciate that. We really do. So, all right, Zach, we'll enjoy your week out there in Denver, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
All right. I will look forward to it. Thanks again, Alan, and thank you all.